Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, joined by my co-host, Tre'Shon Diaz for Tuesday Takes. Got another big victory to talk about here, Tre'Shon, after the true stinker that was the Week 3 0-30 defeat. We get an exciting game with quite possibly the biggest possible rebounding from the offense, going from 0 to 34 and could have been more, I think, if not for a couple of mistakes. Not a flawless day, but certainly a massive improvement from what we saw last week in pretty much all phases offensively. But before we dive into that too much, how are you doing on this episode of Tuesday Takes?
I'm doing well, Kevin. Spent most of the night running around the Call of Duty map using nothing but pistol. That's all I needed. That's all I needed, Kevin. I was inspired by the performance we saw this weekend. And I didn't get a single win, but that's okay. It's, process over results. We're going to get there. We're going to figure it out. It takes time to figure out how to use that pistol.
Yeah. You got to really train. You got to really practice it. And
you got to hone in on those details.
People won't expect it, and you can really flex on them when you show them just how good you are with the pistol. And that does seem to be
yards.
Yeah, it does seem to be Zach Robinson's MO. He's going to prove to everyone how good the pistol is. If only it was Counter-Strike and the Desert Eagle is like arguably the second best gun in the game. But maybe
just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, maybe
Counter-Strike kid up, well, not up in the box anymore.
That checks out given his age. That does. So
actually makes a lot of sense, Kevin.
Yeah, that checks out. So guys, we're gonna dive into the offensive rebound. Talk about how the Falcons managed to get a big win over the Commanders here. A critical game going into the bye at 2-2. So we'll talk about sort of how the team's positioned at this point. Talk about how we're feeling about the rest of the season, the bye week, all that stuff on today's episode. It's going to be a good one, so lock in, folks. And Tre'Shon, I mean, basically all the biggest questions from last week I think we had answered emphatically. You love to see that because going into the bye week, off a bad loss, if they had lost 0-30 going into the bye, then it's 2 weeks of that you have to sort of sit there and marinate it, and it sucks. Everybody hates it, and there's just all this negativity. It's much better to go into the bye coming off a big win over an opponent that I thought the Commanders, even though they were missing some pieces, especially Jaden Daniels, Mariota played one of his best games ever this week. Not that the Falcons made it easy on him either, just he delivered for the Commanders this week. This was very much a good Mariota game. I think this Cliff Kingsbury scheme is perfect for him. That offense is set up really well for him. So the Falcons didn't have a great defensive game, but they had to win a shootout against a Commanders team that was very much up to the task and playing at a very high level in this game. And the Falcons didn't break down. The offense was able to answer the call. Honestly, reminded me a lot of last year's game between these two teams. And this time, the Falcons were in control pretty much the whole game and were able to win this one with the knee. So where do you want to start with this? There's a lot of positive things we could talk about on the offensive side, which is complete 360 from last week, where there was literally nothing nice you could say except maybe Bijan Robinson's good. But that is still true, by the way, guys. That's still true. Yeah.
It's very true. You know what? Let's start with the man that's flipped the script on his own narrative as an individual player. Let's start with the most reliable receiver in the Falcons offense. That's right. I'm talking about Kyle Pitts, Mr. Hands Team on the onside kick, coming up with the football whenever it's thrown his way, extending plays, yak, first downs, touchdowns. Kevin, the revolution is here, and it is televised. Kyle Pitts, all the way back. I'm feeling like we're all the way back.
I'm thinking I'm back. Yeah, but there's so many refs in that 30-second segment. Just you guys, that was just A+ material right there.
Destroying it with the refs.
Yeah, just so many stacked up there. But Pitts has looked great. I think it was a shame that Penix wasn't able to see him last week because he was open for two big potential touchdowns during last week's game. But the connection is clearly there. There's a lot of trust, and Pitts is really I think part of it is that he's fully healthy for sure now, and again, I think the Falcons did him a disservice by downplaying the severity of that knee injury several years ago, where they were like, oh yeah, we're not really going to talk about it. He's going to be out, but it's not a big deal. That was like a devastating knee injury. And, it took him, I think, multiple years really to get back from that. We've talked a lot about the lack of confidence that he was feeling from his coach, in Arthur Smith, and the quarterbacks didn't trust him. That's not the case anymore. I think Penix has a genuine connection with Pitts. The two of them really get along, and Pitts has finally got his mojo back, and you can see it. It's no longer like when he scores a touchdown like last year. It was like, oh, he's just kind of overcoming the frustration and letting that out. And now it's like, no, he's feeling himself, like he's on fire. And I think the biggest way you can notice that is the yards after catch. He's become a yards after catch monster. He's just stiff arming guys and pushing guys off and finding the right angles to get around. That was kind of what was missing, I think, from some of the mid years of Kyle Pitts, is it just wasn't quite there for him. And now I think he's got the confidence. He's got he looks like he's back to full speed athletically, and he's playing with that physicality that you love to see. And yeah, I think Pitts is, in the abs, I think he's become more or less the number 2 receiver for this team, with Darnell Mooney kind of, continuing to struggle and now dealing with a new hamstring injury, which apparently is minor. So good thing that they have a bye this week. Couldn't be coming at a better time. I know we talk about how much we hate an early bye, but in this case, it seems to be very much a good situation for the Falcons. But yeah, Pitts, I think, has beaten expectations, and I think he could have, he could probably have 4 touchdowns at this point, easily, and still a good start for him, no doubt. But I think this is just the beginning of what it could be a career year for Kyle Pitts. Even if he doesn't match the yardage from year 1, I think this will ultimately be a more effective season because of the touchdowns.
Yeah, and people are probably saying oh, you guys might be getting ahead of yourself. It's only 4 games. We've seen Pitts flash before, but Pitts is doing more than just flashing. He is consistently open in every single game. He's giving full effort on every single route, every single play. And the staff just has a different level of belief in him. Last year we talked about how his snap counts were cut basically in half. He's on the field only 50% of the time. That's not the case anymore. The team has enough confidence in him to be on the hands team, on onside kick. So you can tell that it is not just Michael Penix, like you pointed out, who has a good rapport with him, but it seems like the coaching staff has bought in and has a better relationship with Pitts. It just kind of seems like this whole situation is in a better spot. And like you mentioned, with Mooney fading, somebody has to step up. And Pitts stepped up yesterday, did a really good job on that first drive. We see the vertical threat that he can be and that he is, but where he's really picked up his game is understanding how to operate in the soft zone, how to sit down, and how to be that safety valve for his young quarterback, because that's what a lot of us were worried about. Can Kyle Pitts do those responsibilities and not just be a big play guy? Can he get the 5-yard tough catch and extend it for 3 extra yards to get the first? Can he do all those little things that we're seeing? And we've known for a long time, we've seen the peaks of Kyle Pitts and his ability, and we're finally seeing it on a weekly, consistent basis. And that's really all you could ask for from that player. And that's all anybody's asked for, is just to kind of see him be more consistent. And, the Falcons, it's looking like they're going to have a really tough decision ahead of them in the offseason. But, if things keep going the way they do, money that we thought may have been going to somebody like Mooney or another place might not be going there anymore. And the team might feel more comfortable about keeping Pitts around if he's able to continue his really good play that we've seen in the first quarter of the season.
Yeah, it's good problems to have, and I sort of feel like as long as Pitts played pretty well, it was going to be at worst a tag and trade situation. I don't think the Falcons were going to let Pitts walk if he was playing well, and if he wasn't playing well, then who cares? But it's going to be interesting to see how Mooney plays over the rest of the season. Obviously, he's getting up there a little bit in age. Not crazy or anything. He's not an old player by any means, but Pitts is 24 years old. This is 24 years old. It's insane. So he's still. I mean, he could have an entire second contract of still being in his 20s, like in his prime. So that's the type of guy that you usually like to give a big extension to because they're still in their athletic prime. And I think if this team is successful this year and they're able to have this offense, this style that they want to run, which is kind of like a quasi 11-12 hybrid personnel, I think it can be very effective. And Pitts is the perfect guy for that, where he's, we've talked about it. He's more athletic and a better receiver than a typical tight end, and he's a better blocker than most receivers. So it gives you the flexibility to do some interesting stuff and put the defense in a bind with how they want to play you. Do they want to play you with base, or do they want to play you with nickel? And Pitts is a tough coverage assignment for most nickel corners. But if you're he's also not a good matchup for linebackers typically, unless you've got the Falcons are going to put stress on people with the way they're playing their offense and with the personnel there. That is an aspect I think that they have really nailed this year, their willingness to play a lot more 12 and move away from the 11, because like we've seen, I think Ray has been correctly de-emphasized in the offense. And it's not really like a knock on Ray. I think he was always like a solid wide receiver 3, but you should be trying to upgrade that or find a way to improve on that. And I think Ray's always going to be a good like fallback option and a guy that can move into a bigger role if needed, but he shouldn't really be your first place to go. So I think the Falcons de-emphasizing the wide receiver 3 and giving more to Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, I think was a good decision for the structure of this offense. Mm-hmm. And I think going forward, until they are willing to invest in a more premium third receiver, a more dynamic third receiver, perhaps, I think this is the way that they should play it. And I like that they're not afraid to be like, oh, the rest of the NFL doesn't play 12 personnel. We're going to play it a lot. And tell me it's not 11 personnel. Yes. So I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed watching it.
That's something that we talked about this offseason, the pseudo 12 personnel in which you're able to use Pitts as that receiver. It's something that, that the team has been knocking on the door of for a couple of seasons now, but they just have not been able to get that package to work. Looks like it's working now. And credit to this offense for sticking with it and really kind of working through the early struggles that they have and not just abandoning that, because I'm with you, Kevin. I would much rather throw 20 swing passes to Bijan Robinson than 20 Ray McLeod wide receiver screens, which was the case last year. We flipped the script on that, and Bijan is, we could just get into Bijan now if you want, but when we're seeing the generational tagline that was used for Bijan Robinson. Many have questioned that, the first 2 years. He's really good, but is he generational? Is he somebody that's doing things that we haven't seen, in decades? And yeah, he is. He's the first running back since 2011, which was Matt Forte, with 300 rushing yards and 250 receiving yards. He's on pace for the second most yards from scrimmage in NFL history right now, with nearly 2,500. He is everything the team wanted and needed at that 8 pick. And it's just been a joy to kind of watch him go to work. And this week was another special outing. And, it's this guy's 34 years old now, but that's an all-pro linebacker that Bijan Robinson is dicing up in Bobby Wagner, future Hall of Famer. He made the man look like it was time for retirement. But, shout out to Dan Quinn for doing that, putting Wags on Robinson, showing some respect. You got to put a Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame talent on somebody like Bijan Robinson to keep him in check. Yeah.
Bijan Robinson is he talked a lot this offseason about becoming Christian McCaffrey presence in the offense, and spent a lot of time with Christian McCaffrey. And I think he's done it. I think he clearly is that level of presence, and he is playing wide receiver snaps and playing a wide receiver role that he's got some nuance to the things he's doing now as a receiver. And I think he's improved his hands and his concentration, and we already know he does all the other aspects he's an elite yards after catch player. He just becomes a running back, obviously, when the ball's in his hands, and the one thing he doesn't have is true breakaway speed. you can see that he just doesn't really he just struggles to get all the way into the end zone on some of these plays. Safeties are just, the guys that run 4-3 can track him down. But other than that, I mean, he's got everything that you'd want. And I think, yeah, like considering also you have another very good running back in Tyler Algier, like if Darnell Mooney has to miss time or you're trying to, again, de-emphasize Rara McLeod's role, like you can just have Bijan just straight up playing some wide receiver snaps. And I think he's obviously a great runner as well. And I just his evolution as a receiver, we always knew it was something that he could do, but it's been really fun to see it evolve, and not only see it evolve, but see the Falcons emphasize it and throw him the ball. He's the second leading receiver on the team, or I mean, he was first, I think, before this week. Maybe London's ahead now, but he might still be the Falcons like leading receiver. And it's like, oh, the running back's your leading receiver. What is this, like Alvin Kamara getting like 10 short targets a game or something? It's like, no, he's had some big plays as a receiver. He's been everything you could want and more. I mean, I think he's the total package. We're talking about a guy that's on the level of LaDainian Tomlinson, Marshall. Like, I think the guys that he's been compared to with his start to the season this year are like Marshall Faulk and who is the other one?
Falk, Matt Forte.
Yeah, Matt Forte. Yeah, the true like do it all running backs, and that's the pace he's on right now. And I think this is an opportunity for him to an offensive player of the year type of season is the track that he's on at this time. So obviously the rest of the Falcons have to contribute if we're going to get there. It's probably not going to be given to a guy that's not on a playoff team, but let's help him get there, because I think he's earned it. He's earned it so far, and the fact that he has not made the Pro Bowl every year is just ridiculous. So I don't think I think that this is the last year. Last year was the final year of that nonsense happening. So
yeah, it's been, like you said, it's been everything and more that you could have hoped for this year for the start for Bijan. And I think that we will still see, he hasn't technically even, I feel like, peaked. You mentioned it, Algier. Tyler took like half the carries from he took like 15 carries yesterday. So it's just kind of crazy to think of, there's a world where Bijan Robinson could have touched the ball more. But we love TA. He is the closer. And really, helps break down those defenders after they've, been whiffing at Bijan's dead leg all day. Tyler says, "Don't worry, I'm going to come right at you. Not going to make you have to jump around me," and they don't like that either. So it's a great 1-2 punch. And it's a situation that we should relish, because I think Bijan's going to be here, as long as he is willing to play. I think a business decision is probably going to have to be made about Algier, but we're not going to worry about that yet. We're going to enjoy the good times and stay in the present.
Yeah. It's going to be sad when Algier goes. I imagine he'll probably get a starting opportunity somewhere else, and I would not begrudge him at all for pursuing that. So, yeah, I think at this point, we're moving through all the positives. I think Penix is probably the next one we should touch on, because I think he was the most maligned man, maybe other than Zach Robinson himself, after week 3. And, I think there were a lot of overreactions to that game. That was really the first like truly bad game that he had played in his relatively short career so far. And I think there were a lot of strong takes about like, oh, well, the Penix is cooked now. Come on, guys. This is like his sixth game as a starter. Like, we don't know anything about that. So I get after 0 to 30, everybody wants to jump to conclusions and freak out, which, I did a little bit of that as well. But at this point, we now see Michael Penix bounce back in a big way, and deliver, what probably was his best game as a pro, against a Commanders defense that is no slouch at all. This was like I believe they were the 10th ranked scoring defense, one of the best run defenses in the NFL. And we saw the Falcons not be able to run the ball like super consistently, even though they did have success. And it's a pass defense that's susceptible to some big plays, but overall they haven't been bad. So impressive bounce back performance. And it looked like a lot of the issues from week 3 had been addressed. And I do wonder how much of that last week was the communication issues and things like that. And maybe some of that was solved by the move down to the sideline, but also maybe just the technology working the way it was supposed to. Maybe I think that might have been an underrated factor in last week as well.
Yeah. Technology, man, it makes fools of us all at times. And I think that sure, there's probably a boost from having the OC down there, but it really did just come down to the clean execution and efficiency from Penix this week. We just saw somebody who he washed off all of the stank from that Panthers performance and just came out slinging, looked good. There was the one interception, and I think that was a heat check. Penix made that same kind of layered throw last year against the Giants. Yeah, it's a difficult throw, and there's going to be people be like, you shouldn't throw that, but he has the ability to make that. And at that point, I'm not, totally against him taking that shot. We just got to reel it in, Mike. We just gotta layer it a little bit more.
Arc it a little, you can't laser that one. You got to arc that one, and like Sanders still made a great play, but
he did. That was a
still.
great play for the DB.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it, one aggressive interception and then I think like 2 drops, maybe 3 drops. Penix really only had like 2 misses of his own, yesterday, which really just kind of speaks to, his ability to flip the script. That was Mike's words about, coming into this game, is that they are going to flip the script on offense. And they did. And it started with him. You love hearing that the quarterback's going around the building, taking accountability, doing all of those things. We love the intangibles, but the intangibles can only take you so far. Penix showed us why this team believes in him, and he showed why you and not you, Kevin, but he showed why all of us, the listeners, Falcons, Nation, et cetera, need to give this thing some time. This is a guy going into his 7th start. This isn't I keep seeing that, well, he's 25. That doesn't mean anything. Him being 25 means absolutely nothing. He's 25. Okay, great. He sat out 2 years due to injury. He wasn't transferring around or anything like that. He still only has 7 starts at the end of the day. I don't care if he's 25. I don't care if he's 30. He is still getting acclimated to the NFL environment, and he's growing every week. He's improving, and he's not letting his mistakes compound, and he's not creating, a worse situation than what has already been presented to him. And that's what you need to be when you're leading a team that has a first-round pick at running back, a first-round pick at tight end, a first-round pick at receiver. You need to be that point guard. You need to be able to be the guy who can get his playmakers the ball efficiently and consistently. And what we saw from Penix yesterday is what the Falcons have been trying to do, the first 3 weeks. We didn't see a fundamentally different playbook or offense yesterday. It was the same plays that they've pretty much been running. We did see, a play action call in the red zone. Falcons only called 6 play action plays yesterday total. And I think only 2 of them were positive plays. One was the sack, one was the interception, one was the Ray McLeod reverse loss, and then one was the touchdown to Pitts and a dagger route to Drake London, which was a strike over the middle of the field that Penix hit without hesitation. But again, we're not seeing like this big overhaul, new plays, no more pistol or anything like that. It was just really good for me, really good execution, and it started with the quarterback.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if you have great execution, you can make a lot of things work. Like, if your quarterback's playing at a high level and you've got great talent, you can kind of get away with doing just about anything. And I think the criticism, last week is like, this is what it looks like when the players aren't executing well and the scheme isn't really helping them. it's going to be rough. And I think that's the main criticism still of Zach Robinson's approach, is that you're not always going to be executing at a high level every single game. Things are going to go wrong. Things are going to be off track. And if the scheme isn't giving you a boost, then you're going to be bad those games. Like, it's not going to work out. So, I mean, hopefully they can find some sort of medium. They can find a middle ground where we can get a little bit more help from the scheme and continue to incorporate more play action. I don't really get the aversion to it, considering, I mean, I there were definitely some negative plays on play action this week, but also touchdowns and some good plays. And I just, with this run game, that's the main criticism I think I have. Like, again, we've talked about it, like the whole pistol versus other, that doesn't really matter that much. Maybe it matters, if you're just doing extreme splits out of those formations, but there's nothing inherently wrong with pistol either. It's just like there's no reason not to be using play action like at a very high rate in this offense, and maybe they just don't want Penix turning his back to the defense for whatever reason. But I hope that over time we will see more play action incorporated over the course of the season as maybe Penix is getting more comfortable and maybe Robinson's getting more comfortable with Penix turning his back to the defense. But maybe part of it is that like last week, just with the communication errors and the timing, it's like Penix is already not having enough time to read the field before the play. So we really don't want to make him have to turn around and then look back to make a quick read when we're already having issues with that based on some of the other stuff. So maybe if they can string a few good games together or they be a little bit more consistent, we'll see the play action percentage rise. But, it's really not like a problem with Penix, because I think Penix is used play action at an extreme rate. Like in college, I think he was one of the college football's best play action passers and has used it extensively in his career. So it's not like he's uncomfortable with it. It seems like Robinson's the one that's uncomfortable with it, if anything. So we'll see how that develops, but definitely a positive step for Penix. And I think the people that were jumping off the cliff, hopefully you attached a rope so you can climb back up, because, Penix is fine. He's just fine. We've seen far more good than bad for Penix, even before this week. And I think this week was exactly what you wanted to see, bounce back from your presumed franchise quarterback. And I think it shows also that, mentally, he's mentally tough. And I think that was a given. Like you mentioned it, he's a guy that 2 season-ending injuries, bounced back, got better each and every year, has dealt with a lot of adversity and a lot of difficulty and failure over the years, and didn't really let it slow him down. So I wasn't really concerned that he was going to like crumble emotionally or psychologically after a bad game. And I think he proved that's absolutely the case this week with arguably his best game as a pro.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it'll, like you mentioned, it'll be interesting to kind of see, to keep tabs on the communication factor and how things are going. That opening drive of yesterday's game felt all too familiar. The Falcons moved the ball down the field with ease, no issues whatsoever. And then it's almost like they hit this force field around the 30-yard line where suddenly it's just like they've crossed into a plane where all of the silly little mistakes that never happened seem to pop up. You had Bijan with a random fumble. Penix missed Pitts on a drag concept, and the offense, had to settle for a field goal. The big difference this week, when they came to the sidelines, Robinson was there. He was there to talk to Penix. He's able to go over things that happened. And I actually noticed, doing a film review this morning, that the Falcons came back on the very next drive and used different plays that they had set up in that first one, and cashed in on different looks when they came out the second time, building off of successful plays, being a more holistic offense. These are kind of the things that you and I were getting at last week when we talked about, there's just something with this offense when you watch it. It's not that they're in pistol. It's not this. It's not the specific play calls. It's just that it doesn't necessarily seem connected. And yesterday they did a much better job at that, and I mentioned that it was a low amount of play action, but 5 of the 6 play action plays came out of pistol. And that is a movement in the right direction. And one of those calls came in the red zone. And so these are like the little baby steps, getting our toes wet. We need to dive in at this point, but we're seeing, when we're calling these plays is happening at better opportunity. And we're seeing that Robinson is not just kind of pulling plays out of a hat. There seemed to be more intention this week. The details were cleaned up. And it was just overall a much more holistic looking offense. And, I think the only other guy that we really haven't talked about is a guy that we've all been waiting to talk about, and that's Drake London. Had his breakout game, and finally, had the type of performance that fans have been waiting for weeks. Led the team in receiving yards. He looked like the dominant power slot that we had seen last year. And I don't know, Kevin, maybe the firing of the receiver coach did something. Maybe guys just got worried that, hey, if we keep playing bad, no one's going to give us a fat contract at the end of the season. I almost lost it with the first play of the game. Ray dropping a just easy pitch and catch screenplay that was set up, blocked nicely. He just drops it right there on the ground. And I was like, come on, guys. Not today. Not today. And luckily, that was not the day that the team had. But yeah, man, Drake London stepped up, looked good, blocked a lot better. I really do think that the shoulder injury, that we just looked past that so fast, and everyone just kind of assumed like this guy's fine. Week 3, he did not look like himself. And it just kind of seemed like he's back, maybe not 100%, but 95, a lot closer to being all the way there than he was before.
Yeah, I think so. It's like, shoulder injuries don't necessarily affect your athleticism, but they do affect everything about making a catch and surviving the ground and all that stuff. And he just looked uncomfortable. So I'm glad to see it seems to be, he seems to be feeling better. He seems to be confident, and we know that the connection between Penix and Drake London is very strong. And I'm, very excited to see how this continues to grow this year. I think there were a lot of overreactions to, Drake London being kind of just like sort of a solid wide receiver through the first few weeks and not this like dominant force. But I think this week is much more like what you should expect to see, that he's going to be heavily targeted, and particularly with like Darnell Mooney. If Darnell Mooney is not playing or not 100%, like Drake is going to dominate the touches for sure. And it's just good to see him also. Like this felt like like we're just going to return the mojo to everybody game. Like Penix was dealing. They gave him the keys to attempt more throws. You could tell that they were saying like, it's okay, you can rip it. Like he didn't seem hesitant at all to do that. Drake London seemed fired up. Kyle Pitts seemed fired up. Obviously Bijan's just out there. Bijan didn't look any different. You feel his confidence level is just through the roof. Everyone seemed to be firing on all cylinders, and Drake was another one, a good call out there that, again, it seemed like this was the get right game, which they desperately needed after things couldn't have gone any more wrong in week 3. And it gives you a lot of confidence going forward that this is not like you're not entering a slump now. You've been able to right the ship, and now we just have to keep the ship going in the right direction and not take another step back, basically. And, before we go too far into the future, like we should probably talk about the defense a little bit, which this was probably their worst game. And I don't think they played terribly. I think there were a lot of great catches. Like Deebo Samuel this was like vintage Deebo. Like he was catching everything. He was like toe tapping. I mean, I don't even think it was bad coverage on some of these plays. Just Mariota had perfect placement and like just really like good stuff. I think all the reserve guys for the Commanders really stepped up in this game. And, I think we showed D. Alford has a lot of limitations that maybe AJ Terrell wouldn't have. And, I think he got a little bit more exposed in this game. But again, you're talking about your reserve, CB4 essentially playing CB1. And that's a tough spot for anybody. So, but yeah, what did you think, about the defense in this game? Obviously 27 points isn't great. But I think this is one of the best offenses in the NFL. And Mariota, I think, like, as much as people want to talk about him being a backup quarterback, like he played, I mean, I think he was one of the highest rated quarterbacks this week. And it wasn't like a fluke. Like, I think he just legitimately played a great game. So, props to him. I think he was motivated for the revenge game. Just wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, I think that Cliff has done a really good job of kind of getting a offense that is comfortable for Mariota. And the Falcons, the defense I thought maybe had a better day than the points scored reflects, especially since one of those, came off of the interception that put the Commanders down at like the 25 or something like that. So, you take into account that favorable field position. And I think what really stuck out to me was I could kind of live with some of the stuff happening in coverage. Like you said, D. Alford losing to, Deebo Samuel. I think those guys' contract values are separated by about like 30 million or something like that. So like, yeah, Deebo Samuel should probably be winning his matchups against the Falcons CB4. I was pumping up Mike Hughes in like the first half, and then, he did not have a good finish, but still I think had a pretty good day. For me, what's starting to like give me a little bit of heartburn is this run defense. There were like signs of it showing up in the Carolina game, but there were far more pressing issues to pay attention to coming out of Carolina. But this defensive front, it is kind of getting moved and pushed around a bit, and it is susceptible to explosive runs. Yesterday, the Commanders kind of had some good tough runs, but some big pop plays as well with Bill back there. Love Bill. That's probably one of the best running backs in the game right now. And so, I think that I think that this get vertical approach, gap scheme teams that are able to, teams that run a little bit more power, do more things like that, are going to be able to take advantage of that approach just by simply using the laws of physics to their advantage. And so, when we talk about getting vertical, we're talking about exploding off the line, crashing lanes. And the way to take advantage of that is for an offensive line to just redirect, use angles to kind of get that momentum going where they want it to go, and then building a lane off of that. And so we saw that the Commanders were doing a really good job of getting their run game going. The Falcons, they do lack a true nose tackle. They've tried to get it going with Mikael London and David Onyemata this season, and there's been some flashes. Onyemata had a really good double team split yesterday on like a 3rd and short situation, but we're not seeing consistent down to down play from that kind of interior. Our younger guys, Brandon Dorlus, who had a really good game as a pass rusher, is still kind of working out and kind of adjusting to, the feeling of being able to get up when you're a defensive lineman and you feel that space and it almost feels like you're unblocked. Everything inside of you is telling you to get upfield as fast as possible. Sometimes you're going to get trapped. Sometimes that's what they want. They're running a draw, all these different outcomes. So it's just going to take time. They're going to have to understand and do a little bit better with their gap discipline, do a little bit better with their run fits as well. I think that on that 2nd and 3rd level, Billy Bowman is struggling somewhat at times. He makes up for it with his effort and the fact that he's just going to crash in there and cause problems. But we definitely need to see this team get a little bit tighter in the run, because there's going to be groups, especially running quarterbacks, coming up here soon with Josh Allen, where we saw it, like the Commanders kind of picked on them a little. And I was surprised that Divine Diablo hasn't really been given the keys to do a lot of QB spy work. But that's going to be a plus for him. Teams are going to start using the quarterback a little bit more to run on this defense as well.
Yeah. I think there was that one particular play, the one really good, kind of the only scramble Mariota had, which was a psycho level call by Jeff Ulbrich, where they played man and blitzed Divine Diablo. So there's literally nobody home. Like, that was insane.
It's like 3rd and 14 too, or something like that. I'm like,
it's
okay,
like,
Jeff,
this is
buddy.
really unnecessary on so many levels, but that was not great. But I think Divine Diablo should be their QB spy and could do a great job of it. And I think, I think they should lean on that. I think Ulbrich has been a little too aggressive blitzing some of these running quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield was a great example of that. And I just think they need to titrate it. But like you said, that this is an aggressive defense. That's going to be their MO. And they just need to refine it a little bit, play with a little bit more discipline up front. I still think they would benefit from a big nose tackle to eat, blocks in the middle. It doesn't seem like they're interested in that right now, or maybe they just think that there's not really anyone like worth adding at this point, which I get. Could be something that's a big offseason, goal if this staff is still around and we're still building this defense, which I hope that we are. Maybe a serious nose tackle, or maybe a relatively high drafted nose tackle that can give you a little bit of pass rush too. Could be on the table, but in the meantime, I mean, Onyemata had one of his better games too. It's not to say that they didn't get anything from that position, but when you're playing an undersized line, it's just teams that are willing to run a lot of gap at you. Like, you're just gonna get moved when you don't have the size advantage down there. And the Falcons, I think, still played like relatively well. They didn't. I mean, a lot of the Commanders' yardage came just on that one big run. which like that was just Xavier Watts didn't quite bring him down, but he had the wrap up and just couldn't get him down. I don't think that's really like a schematic error or anything like that. Just sometimes players make plays and sometimes they don't. So that was, I think, 60 something of their 147 rushing yards were from that one play. So it be like that sometimes. And the Falcons got to find ways to limit those explosives and play a little bit stronger there. But ultimately, I think the defense is just like so far from being the problem that even in this game, I still felt pretty confident that we'd be able to get it done. And I was a little surprised actually that Quinn chose to kick the field goal there. I know like a lot of people like to do that, but they were rolling on that drive. And I was like, you really want to like stop this momentum and just kick? Like you're like kind of rolling here. Why don't you try to get in the end zone? And I disagree with that decision. I think you try to get into the end zone on a drive where you're really moving the ball well. And that, I like that they did that, like from a Falcons perspective.
Like peak Dan Quinn.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think that's a good idea.
The best thing about playing Dan Quinn is that I'm like, I know they're not going to have all their timeouts in the fourth when they need it. They did not. They burned one at like the beginning of the third.
It was like 2 minutes into the third.
For no reason.
Yeah.
And he's going to settle for a field goal at some point. There's just these things that happen every time we see this man play where I'm just like, oh, Dan, I
love you, Dan.
Miss you sometimes, but like you just have not learned some of these mistakes of yours.
Yeah, love Dan Quinn. He's just he's got some tendencies, that's for sure, that we're all well aware of. So at this point, the Falcons I think did exactly what they needed to do. So good for them. But I mean, I also
shout
thought
out to Raheem Morris.
Yeah, shout out to Raheem. He's also got some tendencies. Like, what was that? What was that before the half?
Yeah.
What was that? What was that? It's like, I'm gonna let the clock run.
An homage, Kevin.
Yeah,
it's
classic.
He's got Dan Quinn across from him, and he's like, "This one's for you, buddy." He's like, "I know."
Two can play at this game. Yeah.
And then it was like, it's like a kid realizing they've been caught. The offense gets the ball, and it's like, hurry, go down the field. We need to try to score here as fast as possible. That was just a great exchange. This is how you just like gotta laugh at this sometimes. And that was before the half, it was kind of just like, are you serious?
What are we doing? Like, it's like okay, like if you want to be conservative and let them run the clock, that's fine. Just take a knee when you get the ball. That's fine. Yeah. No. But like it's like no, we're not going to take the timeout, and then we're going to give Penix 20 seconds to get in field goal range from like the 15. Yeah, that's a great idea. So, just be consistent. Just pick a plan and stick to it. We don't need to. Yeah, he was like, wait, no, I changed my mind. I changed my mind. No. Oh God, yeah. Oh, we've got some special ones. We got some special coaches here, that's for sure. But yeah, I did also want to shout out Jalon Walker and Xavier Watts and the rookies. I thought they all had a good game. I think this was Walker's best game. He's been a dominant run defender. And I think that was one of the biggest concerns coming out. Was like he was a good run defender in college, but you never really know how those undersized guys are going to adapt to NFL size and speed. But he's been lights out as a run defender, and he's been effective at generating pressure. The sacks haven't necessarily come yet, but I was really impressed by Jalon Walker, particularly this week.
Yeah, you said it. He's making people adjust to him. This guy is violently setting the edge. And, we have kind of talked about it at this point where, like, he's playing so well in the run that there's really just no way you can move him. People keep saying they want to see him play some linebacker. And it's just not going to happen because he is providing real value as a run defender. And I know that people want to see him, making sacks, every other play. It's just not how it's going to go for his development cycle. And that's fine. It takes guys time to get their feet wet as a pass rusher. But, a lot of guys struggle at doing the run stuff from the beginning. And that's really what keeps some of these younger pass rushers off the field. When we see the reason we see less of James is that he's not as viable as a run defender. And, that's nothing against him. That was kind of like, the knock on him coming out. And he still gives, good effort, I think, when he's in there. But he just does not, set the edge the same way that Jalon Walker does. And so I thought that was a really good shout out. Xavier Watts had a good day. Had some up and down moments. These we're still seeing. I think what's really promising is that like we're seeing this team experience rookie moments and like shake them off like it's nothing. Billy Bowman has had some moments of his own, but these guys, they bounce back. Xavier Watts, that was a huge interception. At the end of the half, and I mean, talk about range. Like when I watched it on the all 22 this morning, I was like, it was impressive to see real time, but like his acceleration on that to be able to get back there, because he was kind of like, I don't know, he obviously was not out of position. He taught me that he was not out of position. He looked like he was out of position. I was kind of like, oh no, but man, he did a really good job of tracking that ball. And this is like, We've been saying for like 3 years now, we're like, it'd be really cool if somebody else besides Jesse Bates like got a turnover or made a play. And they found a guy who's going to be able to help the team do that. And it's just been, I don't really think, you could ask for a better start, especially from your day 2 picks. Like that's kind of what's crazy is that, you can make the argument that Billy Bowman and Xavier Watts are having a bigger impact than, the 2 first-round edges. And there's like 2 guys I know that like talk every Tuesday that kind of said that would probably be the case. Like one guy was really high on Xavier Watts. Another guy was really high on Billy Bowman. I don't know. Those guys seem to know what they were talking about though, Kevin.
Yeah, those guys, they should get, some props, or like a medal maybe. I will accept, or cash. Yeah, whatever. But it's just nice. I think they've both been, Bowman in particular has exceeded my expectations. I didn't know how quickly he'd be able to adjust. I always thought he was a great like slot conversion candidate, like especially when the Falcons announced it. But I didn't know how fast. You never know with guys like coming from, mostly playing safety to slot. And he's really taken to it like really well. And he looks so small, but it just doesn't seem to matter. So like, some guys are just like that, where it's like they might be undersized, but they just it doesn't seem to affect their play. So shout out to Bowman. And, Watts is, I just feel like I don't understand like why Watts fell. Like I feel like this is like the easiest projection that I've ever done. It's like, people are like, "Oh wow, you were so right about Watts." It's like I don't know how anyone could watch Watts and not be like, "Yeah, that's a starting safety. Yep, starting free safety right there. He's ready to go." He just led college football in turnovers for years or something. Looks like a ready-made NFL player, but apparently NFL teams were like, "Oh well, he doesn't run like a 4.3, so I guess we'll draft him. We'll just let him fall almost into day 3, which is ridiculous." So. I'm glad the Falcons benefited from it's nice that the Falcons can benefit from other teams making mistakes with their drafting for a change instead of the Falcons, vice versa. But speaking of, drafting, Brandon Dorlus, I thought he had a great game and so close to a sack on Mariota there, but he's really been flashing. I think Rook has struggled a bit more in totality, but I think Dorlus has kind of overtaken Rook as maybe one of their most impactful interior guys at this point.
Yeah, it's been fun. I've been really high on Dorlus, and I thought that he would have the opportunity to be the better player between the two. I still think Rook is doing a lot, and honestly, like what's happening with Rook is something that we talked about a little bit, which was like due to the lack of a true nose tackle on this team, Rook is going to be asked to play as a one tech or play the A gap a little bit more than he probably should. And, I think he's done, better than I actually thought he would when asked to do that. I've always seen him as like, he could probably do backside penetrating nose tackle stuff, but they're asking him to, really, really plug these holes on the front side of these runs. And it's been touch and go, like you said. But he's getting better, and the addition of a true nose this next offseason would probably pay off big time for him. But when looking at Dorlus, this kid just has the juice. That first step off the line is lethal. It's kind of like his best weapon right now. At this point, he has a really good feel for timing of the snap count and everything like that. And just violent hands. He was kind of pegged as a tweener coming out. A lot of people didn't think he would be big enough to play inside. But you can't hit what you can't see. This man is just really, really showing that, he's not having any issues operating there. And, it's made him a very versatile player that the Falcons can kind of move, from the 1 tech to the 3 to the 5 and get a lot of good work out of him.
Yeah, so it's nice to see those young guys getting a lot of run this year that they just didn't get last year. And, I like the bones of this defense. I think the Falcons will probably still be the number 1 pass defense after this week. They only allowed 140-something passing yards to the Commanders, which is crazy. This is a sentence I never, ever thought I would utter. We're not, and it's like 4 weeks into the season, the Falcons are the number 1 pass defense in the NFL. And, part of that is their opponents, right? I mean, but like the Bucks are one of the most voluminous passing offenses there is, and the Vikings were thought to be a lot better. Obviously, McCarthy had a terrible game and is now hurt, but I don't think they've played a bunch of pushovers. Like, I mean, maybe the Panthers passing attack, but the Falcons gave them every opportunity to just light them up defensively, and the Falcons didn't really let them do that, which is even more like people are like, oh, the defense gave up 30 to the Panthers. It's like, well, not really, guys. Yeah. But I think the defense ultimately is way better than we expected, and I think that should give people a lot of hope for rest of season, and because the defense is not a problem. I would say the defense is an asset, which is not something I think a lot of people were expecting to see. And now the Falcons are 2-2. Tre'Shon, they're 2-2 going in to their bye week here in week 5, which is good. I think we all would have been really happy with 2-2 going into the season. I would have picked different games to win, but also it is 2 teams that could very likely be wild card contending teams. So those tiebreakers could be valuable. These are not the worst games. Now, it would have been better to win the division games, yes, but not the end of the world. And right now, I think per FanDuel, Falcons are plus 142 to make the playoffs. So, I think that's about the same that they were to start the season. So they're kind of, I think, right about where I expected them to be. And how are you feeling sort of rest of season going into this bye week about where the Falcons stand? Because we've got some tough games coming up after the bye.
Yeah, we have some tough games. You got the Bills and the 49ers back to back. The Saints were kind of taking it to the Bills there at the beginning of the game. That was a close one before the Bills pulled away. And the 49ers, they definitely look beatable here. So, those were 2 games where I was, probably more worried about them at the beginning of the season than maybe I feel now. This team, we'll see who gets healthy, who comes back. Are we going to see Storm Norton come back? Are we going to see, Troy Anderson? That one feels, even with the bye week, a little bit longer. Head still hasn't been activated from PUP. And so, it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to be ready to go. And, I don't, we'll probably get updates on Braylon Trice and a couple of those other guys. Kadarius Hodge missed time. So obviously, from a health standpoint, Mooney's hamstring, the team really needed this break. So it's coming at a good time. When I look at what is the area that the Falcons are still struggling at the most and what can they do during this time to improve, and that is special teams. It's breaking my heart, Kevin, to see this group extremely volatile. There's no real consistency, especially from those coverage units. I think Mike Ford's been great. Mike Ford is like a lot of, there were some people down on Mike Ford, felt like maybe he's a little over the hill. He's had a really good, year and start, as a special teams coverage player, but the other guys, D'Angelo Malone, can't be lost in your own world on that, situation there. That was a big penalty. You got to be better than that. The coverage lane discipline has not been great. Jamal Agnew, he was back, but I don't know if he's not acclimated to the new return rules, but he was not hitting the hole the way that Ray-Ray McCloud was, or that, Natron Brooks, who, we're hoping is doing okay. He suffered a tough concussion. And that's just a guy when you talk about players who are fearless, Natron Brooks is probably the definition of that. He weighs like 175 pounds. This is a guy out there who's playing the most violent game that you can possibly play, puts his body on the line every single play. So, we're really hoping that he gets back because he's a big part of the special teams unit. Kadero Hodge, like I mentioned, he was out. So Xavier Watts was put on special teams. Jesse Bates was even on special teams at one point. So this team has to get healthier. There's a big health issue. And when they're constantly switching in and out all these bodies, there's going to be inconsistencies, and there's going to be some issues when it comes to lane discipline, et cetera. So, we really hope that, going into this bye, the team's able to iron out those remaining issues, because when we look at kind of like who is, the redheaded stepchild of these three groups, it is special teams right now. Parker Romo made his kick, wasn't, he made it. Like, that's all that matters. But, like, okay, 26, 28 yards, cool. The PATs were longer than that. So,
not much to take away from that. At least he hit him.
Not much to take away from that performance at all.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that, an extra week, getting comfortable, in that, in this setting, that Romo's able to look good. But yeah, for me, I'm just really hoping that the special teams can get dialed in, and that this team can get healthy, so that we're not having to pull guys who are doing, the starting work on defense onto those groups, because we can't afford to take injuries there with those players. We saw how that went last year with Troy Anderson, who has literally not recovered since then.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Like, I mean, during the game, like, we see Xavier Watts get roughed up on that, and it's like, there are, like, sometimes you do have to play starters on teams. Like, it's just something. It's a roster mat thing, especially when you have injuries. But in that safety room in particular, where you've already got someone on IR, and DeMarco Hellams just came back from a hamstring, it's like, we really don't have any safeties to burn here, especially your biggest impact guys. So, I think they got to find a way to maybe limit the snaps of some of these guys in those areas. I know Natrone Brooks got hurt, and maybe that kind of forced some of these guys into action that they would normally have been in, but they just got to get that ironed out. I mean, we've seen this special teams look really good this year, and just look not good at all. Like, so I think the blocking on the returns has been pretty bad. Jamal Agnew, this is his first week back after missing 3 weeks, so it's like maybe he just needs a little bit of time to reacclimate. They just need an impact returner, and I think that'll be something they'll probably go after pretty hard next year, I would think. I was always kind of disappointed that, like, Jamal Agnew is like your only move. Like, he can't stay healthy. We already saw that. So, like, just kind of surprised me that was the only thing they did, especially given that we've seen, like, way more return touchdowns and way more big plays in the return game this year. It's really important now, so I don't think it can be ignored anymore. Hopefully next year we'll get either a free agent or a draft pick return specialist in here that can make an impact. But yeah, you just got to get that cleaned up, and hopefully Parker Romo can be solid enough for them, and maybe that, like, week 3 game was just truly cursed, and that, like, we shouldn't take anything else from it. Like, it was just a black hole of that was like our sacrificial game. That's like, okay, we get all the bad juju, we'll just get it all out at one time in week 3, and then we can go ahead into the season without that weighing us down. But yeah, special teams needs to be better, no doubt about it, and I think it will be important to get the kicking game back on schedule. And hopefully won't have any more issues there. I know they brought in Ben Sauls as well to compete, but as long as Romo doesn't have another game like week 3, then he'll probably be okay. But yeah. I think at this point, like, this team 2-2, like, we're fine, and it's really gonna, I think what they do after the bye against the Bills, like, that's really just a litmus test for, can you compete with this Bills team? And can you give them a real game? Can you take it down to the end? Like, the Saints competed with them for a little while, but the Bills pulled away. So can you put the pressure on the Bills, Falcons, and actually stress them out more than just being within a score for like 3 quarters? So I'm curious how that game will go. The 49ers game, the 49ers aren't a pushover, but I think they're not this, like, dominant force that some people were worried they would be. They're just incredibly injured, and that game looks more feasible as a win now. So that would be really helpful. Like, if you could just get one win out of those next 2, and you're going into that sort of softer stretch at 500, that's better than I had projected in my preseason win projection. So I think if you can be 500 going into sort of that Dolphins, Colts, like, sort of area of the schedule, then you're going to be feeling pretty good. And that's what I'm hoping for is we can go in there with some positive momentum and look good against some tough tests here, but easier opponents are coming for this team sooner or later, and I think it's actually good that they're going to be pretty battle tested by some really strong opponents in the early part of the year, so that hopefully they won't be playing down or just getting waxed by these better teams because they know what to expect. But yeah. Are you still thinking, after week 3, I think a lot of people jumped off the ship, but are you still feeling, pretty good about this team's season-long projection here?
My season-long projection for them was 9-8 with a wild card berth, and so I think that's still in play. I can see them getting to that 10 double-digit range. I can even still see them getting into the 11 double-digit range. So there's a long season ahead. We've plenty of football left, and I think that, like you said, getting battle tested early makes you a better team in November and December. And that's really where the Falcons have struggled. And they need to be able to finish their seasons. So I'm excited, cautiously, but still excited to see how this football team plays coming out of the bye.
Yes, I agree. I feel the same way. I still think 10 wins is very achievable. And they just need to avoid the catastrophic collapse games like they had in week 3 and just play more consistent football, which that's always been the issue with this team. So, we'll see how that goes. But guys, thanks so much for tuning in here to Tuesday Takes, another positive post-victory edition. So hopefully we'll have lots more of those this year. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. That really helps us out. Make sure to give Tre'Shon Diaz a follow. He's at Trey3Sean. Also, check out all Trey phases for Trey's video coverage. And let the people know. I think you're working on another video now. What's going on over there?
Yeah. We're just, we're going to go through and look at this game, but we're going to do a Q1 review, kind of look at some different areas of the field, maybe look at, see how the rookies are performing, see how the O-line's really been performing, and kind of do a nice little snapshot review of what we've seen from the team over the first 4 games.
Nice. Definitely check that out, guys. All Trey Phases on YouTube, and it's got a Twitter account as well. And then you can, of course, follow me, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin. All of our written stuff over at thefalcoholic.com. Thanks again to FanDuel for presenting this week's edition of Dirty Birds and Brews. We will be back on Wednesday for another episode of Falcoholic Live, and then we may have a late week show with a special guest if I can set it up. I mean, obviously there's no game, so there won't be a game preview, but might sneak in a little guest action for you guys. Otherwise, we'll be back next week to get ready for a big Monday Night Football adventure against the Buffalo Bills. So that one is going to be an exciting one. Hopefully the Falcons can make us proud by playing the Bills at least reasonably tight in that game. But until next time, guys, thanks so much for joining us here on Dirty Birds and Brews. We'll see you. Have a great day, folks.